You know that nagging voice in the back of your head?
Oh, another one.
It usually kicks in on a Sunday evening, right about the time the weekend dread sets in.
Yep.
And it tells you that you really, really should learn to code, but you also need to bake your own sourdough starter from scratch.
And fix that leaky sink in the guest bathroom yourself.
Right. And, oh, you should probably become fluent in Spanish while you're commuting.
It's the modern anxiety of the Renaissance person. It's just everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We are obsessed with this idea of being good at absolutely everything.
It is exhausting. We wear our versatility like it's this badge of honor. We brag about how busy we are with all our different hobbies and, side hustles.
But the material we're looking at today suggests that we have this completely backward.
Totally backward. In fact, it suggests that this drive to be a jack of all trades isn't just tiring. It is like mathematically destroying your economic value.
That's a provocative stance, to say the least. The material is called the Specialist's Premium, maximizing human capital value. And it pulls no punches.
No, it doesn't.
It basically argues that in the modern economy, breadth is the enemy of profit.
And the core concept here is human capital. I mean, it's a term we hear thrown around all the time, but the sources frame it in a very specific way. It's about treating your brain, your skills, your time, not just as you, but as an investment portfolio.
Exactly. It's asking us to sort of detach from our ego for a second, which is hard to do, and look at ourselves strictly as assets.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out why the market pays such a massive premium for depth for doing one thing incredibly well, and why it actually penalizes breadth.
And we have this really interesting mix of sources to help us do that. We've got classic 18th century economic theory.
Which is surprisingly relevant to my current midlife crisis, I have to say.
And then we've got modern labor market analysis. And to make it all stick, we're going to follow the story of a baker named Annie who is trying and failing to do it all.
Right, and we're going to use all of that to explain two critical, kind of game-changing concepts, the pin factory effect and comparative advantage.
Which, I know, they sound like dry textbook terms.
They really do. But I promise by the end of this, they're going to completely change how you look at your to-do list.
They might even make you feel a little better about not knowing how to fix that sink.
Okay, let's hope so, because I definitely don't know how to fix the sink. So let's start with that foundation. The source material takes us all the way back to Adam Smith.
Right.
Now, usually when I see 18th century economist in the notes, I kind of brace myself for boredom. But this is actually fascinating.
It's the pin factory theory. And it's, you could argue, the bedrock of modern productivity. The source paints this really vivid picture of a pre-industrial worker trying to make a sewing pin.
Just a pin, right. You'd think it's a tiny piece of wire. I mean, how hard can it be?
You'd think. But imagine doing it from scratch, by yourself. You have to straighten the wire.
Which is way harder than it looks.
Way harder. Then you have to cut it to the exact length. Then you have to sharpen the point, which is delicate work. You need a specific tool for that.
Then grind the head, attach it, polish it, package it.
Right. And if I'm doing all this alone, I'm just running around the workshop switching tools every 5 minutes.
Exactly. The source estimates that an untrained worker trying to do every single one of those steps themselves might make, maybe one pin a day?
Maybe. Maybe 20 if they're really, really hustling.
Because you're constantly switching gears. You put down the cutters, pick up the hammer, put down the hammer, pick up the file.
It's that context switching. It just kills your flow. But Smith looked at a factory where the whole process was broken down.
So one person only straightens the wire. That's their entire job.
That's it. The next person only cuts it. The next one only sharpens. 10 distinct stages. 10 different people.
And the output doesn't just go up by 10 times, does it? I mean, logic would say 10 people equals 10 times the pins.
No, and this is the key insight. It's not an additive increase. It is exponential.
Okay.
The source notes that these 10 specialists working together could produce 48,000 pins in a single day.
48,000, that is just mind-blowing.
That is the pin factory effect. Specialization is described in the text as a superpower of productivity.
It turns linear growth into something exponential.
Precisely. And this is where we have to talk about Annie.
Ah, yes, Annie, the case study in our source. She's so relatable because I think we've all been Annie at some point. She wants to open a bakery.
Right.
And she has this romantic, holistic vision of being an entrepreneur that we see on Instagram all the time.
Oh, yeah.
She tells her friend, who's this character Sean, basically the voice of economic reason. She tells him her master plan.
She says, okay, I'm going to bake the best cakes, But to save money, I'm also going to do the bookkeeping myself. And I'll scrub the floors at night to keep it spotless.
I'll drive the delivery van in the mornings.
She wants to own the whole stack. She sees this as being responsible and hardworking. She thinks she's saving money.
But Sean stops her. He asks her a question that I think is one of the most important takeaways from this whole thing.
He asks, how many cakes are you not baking while you are scrubbing the floor? It's just a brutal question, right? It forces you to look at the invisible cost.
Yeah, because we always look at the visible savings. We think, oh, I saved $20 scrubbing the floor myself instead of hiring a cleaner. I can see that $20.
Correct. But if in that same hour you could have baked 2 cakes that sold for $100 profit, you didn't save $20.
You lost $80.
You lost $80. You effectively paid $80 to scrub your own floor.
That's the multiplier effect in reverse. By trying to be the janitor and the driver, she's actually capping her own output as a baker. She's bottlenecking her own superpower.
Exactly. The source argues that by refusing to specialize, Annie is sabotaging her own business. She thinks she's being a business owner.
But she's not.
She's just owning a series of low-wage jobs. She's the CEO, but she's paying herself to be the janitor.
She's the owner, but she's also the lowest paid employee. Wow. That is a tough pill to swallow.
It is. And the text makes a really strong claim here. Specialization isn't about limitation. We often fear that if we only do one thing, we're limited.
Or boring.
Or boring, yeah.
Yeah.
But the source flips that. It says specialization is the only way to unlock the speed and quality required to actually pay for help.
So, if Annie ruthlessly narrows her focus, if she only bakes, she creates enough value to hire the accountant, the cleaner, and the driver, and still take home more money.
That is the promise of the pin factory, but applied to an individual's career. You focus on the high-value link in the chain, and you outsource the rest.
You become the person sharpening the pin, not the person trying to build the whole factory.
Exactly.
Which sounds great in theory, but it brings us to the next big idea the source unpacks, which is rent.
And not the kind you pay your landlord.
Right, the rent on your brain.
Yes, this is the human capital theory. The source argues that wages are basically rent paid by the market for the use of your skills.
I like this framing. It makes you look at your skills like a piece of property.
That's what it is. If you own a piece of property, the rent you can charge depends on 2 things, scarcity and demand. So if you have a skill that is very common, like basic data entry, or in Annie's case, scrubbing a floor, the supply of people who can do it is huge.
So the wage is naturally low. It's like renting out a standard apartment in a city with 1 million empty apartments.
Right. But if you have a skill that is rare, if you have the penthouse with the ocean view,
then you can charge a premium. But this is where the generalist runs into trouble, because in the source, Annie has another crisis.
Right. She's worried about being boring. She doesn't want to just be the baker.
She wants to be a Renaissance woman. It's an identity thing. So she tells Sean, I want to be interesting. I want to take courses in knitting and vocal training and Python programming all at the same time.
And I think this is where a lot of listeners might feel a little defensive. I know I did. Because we're raised to believe that being well-rounded makes us better people.
Right. Broad erudition, as the text calls it. I mean, isn't that a good thing?
Culturally? Maybe. Socially, sure. But economically? The source is just ruthless on this point. Sean asks her, if you learn a little bit of knitting, a little singing, and a little coding, where does that leave you?
You're a novice in 3 things.
Exactly. You are essentially holding 3 properties that are all rundown shacks. You can't charge high rent on any of them.
You have beginner value in 3 different markets. So you're competing with every other beginner. You have no pricing power.
You're fighting for scraps in 3 different alleys instead of eating at the head table in one. That's the trap. The source argues that broad erudition often translates to low market value.
You know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be paid.
Exactly.
So what's the alternative that Sean proposes? Because it sounded pretty extreme when I read it.
It is extreme, but it illustrates the point perfectly. He tells her, Annie, if you buckle down and become a top-tier programmer, ruthless, narrow specialization, you will earn enough to hire the best singers to come and serenade you in the morning.
While wearing sweaters knit by the best knitters. That is such a power move. Don't learn to sing badly. Earn enough to buy the concert.
It just changes the goalpost. Instead of struggling to be mediocre at everything, master one high-value thing and use the rewards from that to access everything else.
But does this apply to everything? I mean, surely there's value in connecting dots, right? Being the person who knows a little about marketing and a little about engineering, we hear about stacking skills.
There is, and the source doesn't deny that some roles need that. But even then, that synthesis is the specialization. The danger the source warns against is that fear of missing out approach to skills.
Just learning things to say you know them.
Right, without ever reaching the depth you need to sell them for a premium. It's that difference between, I can sort of do this if you give me a manual, and I am the person you call when this needs to be done right now.
Which leads us directly into the conflict of depth versus breadth. The source calls this the specialist's premium.
And this section explains why generalists so often feel undervalued. You feel like you're working hard, you know a lot, but the paycheck just doesn't reflect it.
The harsh reality the source presents is that generalists are, by definition, easily replaceable.
Ouch. Yeah, that hurts the ego.
It does. But it's just supply and demand. If you are a jack of all trades, there are likely thousands of people who can do 80% of what you do.
And in economics, replaceability is the enemy of high wages. If I can replace you tomorrow, I don't need to pay you a premium today.
The source uses a medical analogy here that I thought was really clarifying. It compares a therapist like a general counselor to a neurosurgeon.
Right. So think about the therapist. They're incredibly valuable. They have broad knowledge of the human condition, relationships, anxiety.
They're well-rounded, empathetic people.
Absolutely. But the neurosurgeon, they might be terrible at marriage counseling. They might not know how to treat a common flu. Their scope is incredibly narrow.
They just navigate the geography of the brain. That's it.
That's it. They map blood vessels and remove tumors.
But the source says the neurosurgeon earns 10 times what the therapist earns.
Or more. And it's not because they are smarter or because they work harder. It's because they possess a complex skill that is extremely hard to replicate.
You can't just step in and perform brain surgery after a weekend workshop.
Whereas, and no offense to therapists, mine is great, but the barrier to entry is just different. The rent follows the scarcity.
So the source is telling us that in the eyes of the economy, the old saying, jack of all trades, master of none, is actually a warning label.
It essentially says master of all trades usually means master of nothing when it comes to value.
Because you never get deep enough to be rare. You're always in the shallow end of the pool with everyone else.
Exactly. The key metric the source highlights is this. Income is often directly correlated to how difficult it is to replace you.
That is a scary question to ask yourself on a Monday morning. How easy would it be to replace me?
It's uncomfortable. But it's a diagnostic question you need to ask if you want to increase your human capital. If the answer is pretty easy, you have a problem.
You need to become the neurosurgeon of your field.
You do.
Okay, so let's say the listener is sold. They're thinking, fine, I'll specialize. I want that premium. But here's the problem I always run into. How do you choose?
The selection problem.
We have multiple interests. How do you decide which basket to put all your eggs in?
This is the practical application part. The source material offers a
This is where we get into the math of decision making, and I want to walk through this slowly because it's a bit counterintuitive.
It is. So let's go back to Annie. She's torn, she likes drawing, she's artistic, and she also likes compiling data reports. She enjoys both equally.
Okay. A creative and an analytical mind? A dual threat.
Sure. But Sean forces her to look at the numbers. He says, okay, Annie, it takes you 1 hour to draw a picture, and you can sell it for $20.
And it also takes her 1 hour to compile a complex report, which she can sell for $100.
Right.
So 20 versus 100. It seems obvious when you say it like that. You do the report.
But Annie says, but I like drawing. Why can't I do that sometimes? What's the harm? And this is where the text delivers a hard truth about alternative cost.
Right. Because usually we think, if I draw the picture, I make $20. That's a profit. I'm up $20.
But economics says, no. Because you have limited time. You have 1 hour.
Right.
If you spend that hour drawing.
You didn't spend it doing the report.
Exactly. So you didn't just make $20. You gave up the $100 you could have made.
So wait, you lost $80.
Exactly. Every time she draws a picture during work hours, she is effectively paying $80 for the privilege of drawing. She's subsidizing her own hobby.
Wow. That puts a huge price tag on a hobby. That really changes how you look at downtime during the workday.
And the source is very strict about this. It says, your hobby shouldn't interfere with your capital.
That is a tough pill to swallow. It feels like we're kind of killing the joy.
I know, it sounds cold. But the source isn't saying never draw. It's saying don't confuse your hobby with your profession. Your specialization should be chosen based on where your return is highest relative to the market.
Not necessarily what you enjoy the most, but where you have the comparative advantage.
Right. It's about maximizing the return on your most limited resource.
Time.
Time. It's the one thing you can't make more of. If you spend your time on low-yield activities, even if you enjoy them, you're depreciating your own asset.
Yeah.
You are letting the penthouse sit empty while you try to rent out the basement.
This really challenges that standard career advice to follow your passion. The source seems to suggest we should follow our comparative advantage.
Sometimes they overlap, and that's the jackpot. That's the dream. But if they don't, you have to decide what your goal is.
Right.
If the goal is economic freedom, the ability to hire those singers, or buy the bakery, or retire early, then you follow the math. You do the $100 reports so you can afford to draw for free on the weekends.
You know, as we're talking through this, I'm realizing this just requires a massive shift in identity. We like feeling capable. We like feeling self-sufficient.
We do. And that brings us to the summary of what we've unpacked, because I think we need to look at the trade-off here.
Okay, so let's recap the 4 main pillars we've pulled from the source.
Right. So pillar 1, the pin factory. The logic that splitting tasks and specializing creates this multiplier effect on productivity.
You produce hundreds of times more by doing less. Pillar 2, human capital. Your skills are an asset, and your wage is rent.
And if you want higher rent, you need rarer, more developed assets, not a collection of fixer-uppers.
Exactly. Pillar 3, the specialist's premium. The market ruthlessly penalizes replaceability, depth pays, breadth costs.
Being a jack of all trades is a fast track to low wages. And finally, comparative advantage.
When in doubt, look at the math. Calculate the alternative cost. What are you not earning by doing that low-value task?
Exactly. It's a framework for decision-making.
But this leaves us with a really interesting philosophical tension, doesn't it? Because the source material is very clear on how to get rich. But is it clear on how to be happy?
That's the hidden question. Think about Annie again. If she listens to Sean, she stops cleaning. She stops driving the van. She stops drawing pictures for $20.
She just does the high-value reports or the high-volume baking. She becomes wealthy. She becomes a powerhouse.
She's the pin factory personified.
Yeah.
But she also becomes dependent. She now needs the cleaner. She needs the driver. She needs the accountant.
She can no longer sustain her own life in isolation. That's true. The jack of all trades feels very autonomous. If the world ends, I can fix my roof and grow my own potatoes.
But the specialist is rich, and they are helpless outside their niche. If the neurosurgeon's sink breaks, they are stranded until the plumber arrives.
So that is the provocative thought to leave with the listener. The source's logic is undeniable for generating wealth. It works. But it asks us to make a trade.
Are we willing to trade the feeling of self-sufficiency, that pride of doing our own laundry or baking our own bread, for the economic power to hire others to do it?
It's a question of values. Is the goal to be capable or to be capitalized?
The source says choose capital, but the heart might say otherwise.
It's definitely something to chew on the next time you're debating whether to call a plumber or watch a 3-hour YouTube tutorial on how to fix pipes yourself.
Calculate the alternative cost.
Yeah.
If your hourly rate is higher than the plumber's, just put down the wrench.
Hard advice, but valuable advice. We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It has been a pleasure.
We encourage you to take a look at your week and calculate your own alternative cost. You might be surprised at how expensive your DIY projects actually are. Thanks for listening.